Welcome to the dark side of reality, where the line between fact and fiction blurs, where truth hides in the shadows waiting to be revealed. This is true crime. And today we delve into a chilling tale that will question everything you thought you knew about identity, reality, and the nature of self. This is the story of the man who woke up twice. Prepare yourself, for this is not just a story. It's a descent into the abyss of the unknown, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved. But tonight, we dare to explore the darkness. Are you brave enough to join us? The day began like any other. Sunrise painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. The smell of brewing coffee filled the air. A man, still shrouded in the haze of sleep, reached over to silence the insistent buzzing of his alarm clock. He yawned, stretched, and stumbled out of bed ready to face the day ahead. Little did he know, his world was about to unravel. There in the mirror stood a man. He was the same height, the same build, with the same unruly hair and tired eyes. He wore the same pajamas, the same weary expression of someone who had just woken up. But something was terribly wrong. The man in the mirror was him, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. It was like looking at a perfect copy, a doppelganger, staring back with an eerie familiarity that sent chills down his spine. His heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. He slowly raised his hand, his movements stiff and mechanical. The reflection mirrored him perfectly, every twitch, every tremble. But a creeping dread began to coil in his stomach, a sense of unease that whispered of something deeply, terribly wrong. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat, a strangled gasp trapped behind a wall of fear. His breath hitched, fogging the mirror momentarily, obscuring the reflection. He blinked, hoping, praying that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of his sleep-addled mind. As the fog cleared, his blood ran cold. The reflection remained. It was still him, yet not him. His mind struggled to grasp at logic, at reason, but the more he stared, the more the reflection seemed to twist, to distort, becoming something alien and unsettling. His reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of the lips that didn't reach the eyes. His own face remained frozen in a mask of terror, but the reflection, it seemed to mock him, to revel in his fear. The smile widened, becoming a grotesque parody of his own, and a cold, primal fear gripped him. He jerked his hand back, a choked sob escaping his lips. The reflection, however, didn't mimic him immediately. It lingered for a heartbeat, the smile still plastered on its face before slowly retracting its hand, mimicking his movement with an unsettling delay. Panic surged through him, threatening to overwhelm him. He stumbled back from the mirror, his eyes wide with terror. This wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't his imagination. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. He had to get out of there to escape the chilling gaze of the doppelganger in the mirror. But even as he turned away, a morbid curiosity compelled him to look back. The reflection was gone. The bathroom was empty, the mirror reflecting only the pale, tiled walls and the faint glow of the rising sun filtering in through the window. He was alone. He placed a trembling hand on the cool surface of the mirror, his heart still hammering against his ribs. His reflection stared back, his own fear-stricken eyes looking back at him. Had he imagined it? Was the stress of his life finally getting to him? He scanned the bathroom again, searching for any sign of the doppelganger, but there was nothing. It was as if it had never been there. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he gripped the edge of the sink, his knuckles turning white. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He needed to think rationally. Maybe it was just a bad dream, a hallucination. He had been working long hours lately, hadn't been sleeping well. That had to be it. It had to be. He turned away from the mirror, forcing himself to move, to escape the confines of the bathroom. As he did, a sound caught his ear, stopping him dead in his tracks. It was a soft, even breathing coming from his bedroom. His blood ran cold. He lived alone. There shouldn't be anyone else in his apartment. Slowly, his heart pounding in his chest, he crept towards the bedroom door. He could hear the breathing more clearly now, slow and steady, like a sleeping man. With trembling hands, he pushed open the door, his eyes widening in horror at what he saw. There, lying asleep in his bed, was a man. The man, his doppelganger, the one from the mirror. He stood frozen in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat, his mind reeling from the impossible sight before him. The man in his bed, his exact double, lay sound asleep, his chest rising and falling with each rhythmic breath. The morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the scene with an eerie clarity that only served to heighten the surreal horror of it all. His mind, desperate for an explanation, for a way out of this nightmare, latched onto the most logical, the most mundane explanation. It was a trick of the light, a figment of his sleep-deprived imagination, a hallucination, nothing more. That had to be it. He shook his head, trying to clear the image from his mind, but the harder he tried to deny it, the more real it became. The weight of the situation, the sheer impossibility of it all, pressed down on him, suffocating him with a fear he had never known. His legs trembled beneath him, threatening to give way. He took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching out to grip the doorframe for support. He had to get out of there, to escape the suffocating terror that had invaded his home, his life. His gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape, for anything familiar to cling to in this sea of madness. His eyes fell on the light switch, a beacon of normalcy in the surreal tableau. He lunged for it, his hand trembling as he flicked the switch. The sudden burst of light did nothing to dispel the horror. If anything, it only served to illuminate the scene with a harsh, unforgiving clarity. The doppelganger remained undisturbed, lost in a slumber so deep, so peaceful, it was as if he were oblivious to the silent scream tearing through the man's soul. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth, stifling a gasp of horror. The fear, once a cold knot in his stomach, now surged through him, a tidal wave of panic threatening to drown him. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror across the room. His face, normally so familiar, was now a mask of terror, his eyes wide with a primal fear that spoke of something broken, something irrevocably shattered. He looked away, unable to bear the sight of his own reflection, a chilling reminder of the nightmare unfolding before his eyes. He backed away from the bedroom, his eyes never leaving the figure on the bed. Each step away from the room, from the impossible truth that lay within, felt like a victory, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of sanity. "This isn't happening," he muttered, the words a desperate plea, a mantra against the madness that threatened to consume him. This can't be happening, but deep down, buried beneath the layers of denial and disbelief, a chilling truth was beginning to dawn. This was real, this was happening, and he was utterly terrifyingly alone. He couldn't stay like this, paralyzed by fear. He had to do something. He had to understand what was happening. Slowly, cautiously, he rose to his feet. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He had to get a closer look. He had to see for himself. He crept back towards the bedroom door, his steps slow and deliberate, his hand hovering over the doorknob, hesitant to break the fragile silence. With a deep breath, he pushed open the door, his heart pounding in his chest, his gaze fixed on the figure lying asleep in his bed. He had to know. Who was this man, and what was he doing in his life? He stepped cautiously into the room, the floorboards creaking softly beneath his feet. The air hung heavy, thick with an unsettling stillness that seemed to amplify the frantic beating of his heart. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, remained fixed on the figure in the bed. With each step closer, the details of the doppelganger sharpened, becoming more defined, more real. The man's chest rose and fell with each breath, slow and rhythmic, the peaceful slumber of a man untroubled by conscience or care. He looked normal, too normal. He stood over the sleeping figure, his shadow falling across the bed, a dark silhouette against the pale morning light. The air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a sense of wrongness that sent shivers crawling down his spine. He reached out a trembling hand, hesitant to break the fragile illusion of peace, yet compelled to confirm what his eyes refused to believe. His fingers, cold and clammy, hovered just above the doppelganger's shoulder. He could feel the heat radiating from the body below, smell the faint scent of his own cologne clinging to the unfamiliar skin. The urge to touch, to confirm the reality of this impossible situation, warred with a primal fear of what he might find. He drew his hand back as if burned, a shudder running through his body. No, he couldn't bring himself to touch it, to acknowledge the tangible reality of this nightmare. There had to be another explanation, a rational answer to this impossible situation. He turned away from the sleeping figure, his gaze darting around the room, searching for clues, for anything that could shed light on this mystery. He rifled through drawers, checked his closet, his movements frantic, desperate. But everything was as it should be, his clothes neatly folded, his belongings in their usual places. He sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, his mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Who was this man? How did he get into his apartment? And why did he look exactly like him? Was it a prank? A cruel joke orchestrated by someone who knew him, knew his deepest fears? His gaze swept across the room again, this time searching for any sign of forced entry, any indication that someone else had been there. But the windows were locked, the door showed no signs of tampering. There was no evidence, nothing to support the idea of an intruder. He caught his reflection in the mirror across the room, a haggard, haunted stranger staring back at him. His mind, desperate for a way out of this labyrinth of confusion, latched onto the impossible. What if this wasn't a prank? What if this wasn't some elaborate hoax? What if, by some inexplicable twist of fate, he was looking at a duplicate of himself? A perfect copy, identical in every way, down to the last detail. The thought, as absurd as it seemed, sent a chill down his spine. It was the stuff of science fiction, of late-night horror movies, not real life. He paced the length of the room, his thoughts a jumbled mess of fear, confusion, and a growing sense of unreality. He had read stories, heard whispers of doppelgangers, of sinister doubles that haunted the lives of their unsuspecting counterparts. But those were just stories, myths designed to frighten and entertain, weren't they? He had to tell someone, to confide in someone, anyone. He reached for his phone, his fingers fumbling over the keys as he dialed his best friend's number. The phone rang, each tone a hammer blow against the silence of his fear. He needed to hear a familiar voice, to ground himself in the normalcy of everyday life. "Hey man, what's up?" His friend's voice, cheerful and unsuspecting, cut through the tension like a lifeline. He opened his mouth to speak, the words forming on his lips, but then hesitated. How could he possibly explain this? How could he put into words the impossible truth that was unfolding before his eyes? He stammered, his voice a choked whisper. I think I have a problem." "A problem?" His friend chuckled on the other end of the line, the sound jarring against the man's raw nerves. "What kind of problem could you possibly have at this hour? It's about me," he managed to stammer, his voice barely a whisper. "You? What about you?" His friend's tone shifted, a hint of concern replacing the earlier amusement. "Are you all right?" He closed his eyes, the weight of his situation pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. "I don't know how to say this, but there's another me." Silence. Dead air stretched between them, the silence of disbelief, of incomprehension. He could practically hear his friend's mind working, trying to process his words, to make sense of the impossible, and then a soft chuckle, disbelieving, almost mocking. "Okay, buddy, very funny. What's the real problem?" Anger, hot and sudden, flared within him. "I'm serious," he hissed, his voice tight with frustration. "He's here in my apartment. He looks exactly like me. Look, I know you're stressed." His friend's voice softened, taking on a placating tone. "How about you just take a deep breath, relax, and tell me what's really going on?" "I am relaxed," he snapped, his voice rising in pitch. "I'm looking right at him. He's asleep in my bed." He could practically hear his friend sighing on the other end of the line. "All right, listen. I'm coming over, okay? Just stay put. Don't do anything stupid." He hung up the phone, the plastic clattering against the wall, as he let it fall from his grasp. He was alone, trapped in a nightmare with no escape, no explanation. And the worst part, he was starting to doubt his own sanity. His gaze drifted around the apartment, landing on the kitchen counter. There, on a plate, sat a half-eaten sandwich, crumbs scattered across the surface. He didn't remember making a sandwich. In fact, he hadn't eaten anything all day. He walked over to the counter, his heart pounding in his chest, a chilling suspicion forming in his mind. He picked up the plate, the ceramic cold against his trembling fingers. He hadn't eaten this. But if he hadn't, then who had? He opened the refrigerator, his eyes scanning the contents. There, tucked in the back corner, sat a carton of almond milk. He hated almond milk. He always had. His gaze darted to the crisper drawer, and he pulled it open with a trembling hand. Inside, nestled amongst the vegetables, sat a container of tofu. He was a meat and potatoes kind of guy. He never, ever touched the stuff. He slammed the refrigerator door shut, the sound echoing through the silent apartment like a gunshot. It was him, the doppelganger. He had been here, in his apartment, eating his food, living his life. Panic, raw and primal, surged through him, threatening to overwhelm him. He was no longer dealing with a mere reflection, a fleeting glimpse of the impossible. This was real, tangible, and it was happening right under his own roof. He stumbled back from the counter, his eyes darting around the apartment, seeing his own life through the lens of this newfound terror. Every detail once so familiar now seemed alien, tainted by the presence of the other. He had to get out of there. He had to escape the suffocating presence of his double, of this impossible situation that was slowly driving him mad. As he reached for the front door, a sound stopped him dead in his tracks, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine and turned his blood to ice. It was the sound of his own voice, calm and collected, coming from the living room behind him. "Where do you think you're going?" He stood frozen, every muscle in his body locked in a silent scream. His words, hung in the air, a chilling echo of his own voice coming from a source that defied explanation. The normalcy of the tone, the casual inquiry, only amplified the terror that coiled in his gut. Slowly, as if in a trance, he turned to face his tormentor. There, sitting calmly on the couch, was his double. The same face, the same tired eyes, the same unruly hair. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to the man's own dishevelled pyjamas. The doppelganger met his gaze with an unsettling calmness, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. Who are you?" he choked out, the words rasping in his dry throat. The doppelganger chuckled, a low, humorless sound that sent chills down the man's spine. "What a question," he replied, his voice a distorted reflection of the man's own. "Who do you think I am?" He stumbled back, his mind teetering on the precipice of madness. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. And yet, here he was, face to face with the impossible, the undeniable truth of his own fractured existence staring back at him. Days turned into weeks, each one a blurry, nightmarish spiral into the abyss of the unknown. He tried everything to unravel the mystery of the doppelganger. He scoured the internet for answers, consulted dusty tomes on the occult, even subjected himself to a battery of medical tests, desperately seeking a rational explanation for the madness that had invaded his life. But the answers remained elusive, shrouded in a mist of fear and uncertainty. Doctors dismissed his claims as stress-induced hallucinations. The internet offered nothing but wild theories and dead ends. He was alone in his terror, adrift in a sea of doubt and disbelief. The doppelganger, meanwhile, became a constant presence in his life. It came and went as it pleased, sometimes silent and observant, other times engaging in cryptic conversations that left him more confused and terrified than before. He tried confronting it, demanding answers, but the doppelganger always managed to evade his grasp, vanishing into thin air, leaving him questioning his own sanity, wondering if he was, in fact, losing his mind. In the end, there were no answers, no explanations. The man was left to grapple with the chilling reality of his situation, the knowledge that his life, his very identity, had been irrevocably fractured. He was the man who woke up twice, trapped in a waking nightmare with no escape, no resolution. He learned to live with the fear, the uncertainty. He became a ghost in his own life, haunted by the presence of the other, forever looking over his shoulder, never knowing when or where the doppelganger might appear. The man who woke up twice never discovered the origin of his double, never understood the purpose behind its haunting presence. But he carried the weight of the experience with him, A constant reminder that there are some mysteries that defy explanation, some truths too terrible to comprehend. And so, the story ends, not with a bang but with a whimper, a chilling testament to the enduring power of the unknown. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves.